What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I'm Albert Vartanian with my co-host for our FPL show, Marty Levionnois, the FPL Oracle. Marty, listen, he did it, and I told you he would do it. What a performance. What an FPL return. Fernando Marcal played the game of his life. 2 assists, a clean sheet, and brought home a bonus point for his FPL managers. He thought it was going to drop Ronaldo, but no. Fernando Marcal. You were talking Nelson Semedo. Everyone was going Semedo. Tomato. Marcal, what about that performance, buddy?
Honestly, nothing made me more sick this past weekend than seeing that return from Marcal. I was so upset. Like, I see Ronaldo scores, I roll my eyes, whatever. He scores again. I'm avoiding Twitter.
Whoa. Why are you rolling your eyes to Ronaldo scoring? Listen, you're not a United fan. I'm not a United fan. But there was something special about that. We'll get back to that, but let's continue with our boy from Wolves.
I was rolling my eyes from an FPL point of view because I didn't bring him in. I was like, okay, here, I'll be cheeky. But anyways, and then I see what Marcal does, and I mean, nothing upset me more this past weekend than that. I was so pissed.
Did you see his 2 assists? Did you see them? One was an own goal, and the other one was scrappy, a blocked shot.
He had no idea what was going on. Yeah,
dude. According to Opta, he didn't create a single chance, which is hilarious. And he got 2 assists, clean sheet, and a bonus point.
I'm so mad.
And Semedo's the one he's the one creating the chances. Honestly, Semedo, he's going to score. It's going to come. He's always in the right spot. But listen, if you got Marcal right now, he's gone up in price. I think he's 4.6 now. Listen, keep the change. Hold on to Marcal. Don't worry about Macedo. If Semedo scores, so be it. At least you have the other side. And, he still played a good game. Not many chances created, but listen, a return is a return.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. A return is a return. If you pull the trigger like you did, congrats. It's a good pick, but I think long term, I'm sticking with my guy Semedo for sure.
Okay, let's talk about our boy, or at least my boy, Cristiano Ronaldo. Started off at 12.5 million, is now 12.6. Scored 2 goals against Newcastle. He looked fantastic. In the midweek in the Champions League, he scored as well. Unfortunately, Manchester United did not win that game. He's nearly 40% owned as of right now. If you don't have him, do we bring him in? At least if I have him, I wildcard for him. I think that's one of the only ways you can probably do it is bringing him through a wildcard unless you're dropping off a premium like Salah or Bruno Fernandes. I wouldn't recommend Salah, maybe Bruno, but Bruno at the same time scored a goal, creating chances. It's a tough choice at the moment.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, as someone, obviously everyone knows now I'm not a Ronaldo owner, and I think I won't be moving forward for a little while just because of how I set up my team and how my long-term plans look with mostly targeting Chelsea players prior to Game Week 7 and especially Game Week 7 and beyond for their run of fixtures. So It's a tricky one. I get it. It's hard to see a guy who has scored, 3 goals in 2 games since joining his new club. And obviously in FPL, the points are going to be there. I think even with tough fixtures, he's going to continue contributing and getting some returns. But for me, if I don't have him by now, I don't want to pull the trigger on a wild card only to drop him in a couple weeks when I want a Chelsea player anyways. So it's a tough spot to be in. Do I regret not bringing him in? Maybe. But I think long term, if I can stick to my guns, if I can, end up with Lukaku, which I will, at some point I'm definitely going to have Ronaldo this season. I'm fine not having him for the next month or so. But I think probably closer to December and especially through the new year, he'll be in my team for sure. So it sucks right now, but he'll definitely be there getting me some points at some point.
Yeah, the other premium man up front is Romelu Lukaku, as you mentioned, 11.5. I think he's gone up as well to 11.6. He seems to be mirroring Ronaldo, 2 goals against Aston Villa in the Premier League and then a goal midweek in the Champions League. A really good run of fixtures coming up starting at Game Week 7, which we keep talking about. It seems like everyone's going to wildcard at that point and bring in some Chelsea assets. If you don't have Ronaldo, Lukaku is a fantastic alternative at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You saw his performance in his debut when he came into the Premier League, and I think we're going to see more performances like that one and like the one against Aston Villa moving forward. Yeah. He has to be a staple in this Chelsea team. He's going to be so good this season. And at 1 million less than Ronaldo, especially with the fantastic fixtures, like we keep harping on, we keep mentioning them, I just think it's a no-brainer. Whether you get him in now, obviously the next couple of fixtures aren't fantastic for Chelsea, but that doesn't really matter with a premium player. You can still target them ahead of time if you want to jump the gun a little early. They play Tottenham this weekend and then Man City at home after that. But like we've said many, many times, I won't get into it too much just because we've said it so much, but game week 7 on Chelsea, I mean, how could you not target him or some other Chelsea players? But for me, he's the number one player on that team.
I have to apologize for that Christensen shout. I brought him in as my Chelsea defender. He didn't play. He was on the bench. I expect him to play at some point. I mean, it looks like some of the other defenders are ahead of him at the moment, but I also read that they're offering him a new contract, so who knows? I just want to throw it out there. My apologies. Still have him on my team. I'm not going to ship him out. I'm going to hope for the best that he starts against Spurs, because I do think that Chelsea will keep a clean sheet against Spurs. That's just what they do. Hey, Marty, they just keep clean sheets. Offensively, they're solid. The midfield, and now Lukaku is like the final, the sprinkle on top of the sundae. But anyway, let's move on to your guy who you shouted out, I want to say maybe in the first or second episode, Demarai Gray. 3 goals in 4 matches, 9 points, 8 points, 7 points. The returns are fantastic. And now a pretty good run of fixtures for Everton and Demarai Gray. Away to Villa, at home to Norwich, United tough matchup away, but then you got West Ham, Watford, and Wolves, and then Spurs, who could be dealing with some injuries at the back. So a pretty good run of fixtures at a very cheap price. You can be getting an attacker whose returns are better than most players that are above his price range.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he's scored in 3 games in a row. The bonus points haven't totally been there for him at this point, unfortunately. He had it in the one match. But in the last 2, he just kind of missed out on bonus points in both of those. But if he can continue this run of form and maybe get some more assists as well, create more chances, we could see some bonus points coming his way on top of the points he's getting for goals. But for me, I mean, this is one that I look back at that our first conversation about him, and I'm just shaking my head because I know I should have pulled the trigger when I first mentioned him. But this is one for me, though. Although he's been doing great, I worry about being late to the party. His price has gone up to 5.7 now, which is still a great price, don't get me wrong. But I just worry that as soon as he dips in form, maybe you pay 5.7 for him. He goes and doesn't score, doesn't get a return for a couple games. Maybe he will. But if he doesn't, I worry about his price now dropping back down, and you end up losing money on him. So for me, it's one where I definitely am going to keep watching him, because if he can continue this, under $6 million is an amazing price. But I'm not as sold on him. I don't know what it is. I just feel like he's one of those players where if you got him early, maybe you hang on to him. But I just, for some reason, I think it's just in the back of my mind that Everton, that distrust of Everton assets, it's still there for me. And that's probably why I didn't go with him. But they look a lot better than they have in the past offensively. I know DCL is injured right now, but I still think they can create, they can score, and he's going to be a part of that. So for me, I'm on the fence, but definitely he's on my watch list.
We have these types of players, I feel like, every single Premier League season, where it's like, the first couple weeks they keep banging goals away. Remember Timo Pukki a couple seasons ago when he came in? I think he scored in like 5 straight games and then died off for the rest of the season. Demarai Gray can be that player, or could be that player. Hopefully not for those Demarai Gray owners. We talked about him from the top of the show. Fernando Marcal, Marty. 2 assists, 1 clean sheet. Wolves fixtures continue to be very good. Brentford at home next, and Southampton away. Newcastle, Aston Villa, and then Leeds. I made the case for him already. My whole thing was I looked at the heat maps between Semedo and Marcal. I've watched the matches, and they're very, very similar in how they play. The manager has them instructed to get forward, get into the box, try and create as many chances as he possibly can, cross the ball in, and obviously with this fantastic fixture schedule, hopefully a couple clean sheets. So I looked at that. I'm like, I can save 0.5 at the time on Marcal. I'm just going to go that way. I was able to get some players that I wanted into my team. But with that said, Semedo isn't a bad choice. I mean, longer term, based on what he's been doing, creating the chances that he's been creating, the shots in the box, getting into the box, Semedo is probably the one who's going to come back with more returns as the season progresses. But, I mean, if you want a discount, Marcal isn't a bad play at all, and you get the same fixture schedule as his teammate Semedo.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've mentioned it before. I'm leaning Semedo, and now the difference in price between the two is only 0.3 because Semedo's down to 4.9 and Marcal's price has gone up. So not as big of a price gap as before, so you're not quite saving as much. You're still saving a little bit if you want some Wolves defensive exposure, so I get why people would do it. But for me, I mean, you can't look past those fixtures because, I mean, if they can really, even in their first three games, they only conceded once in each of those, and then obviously the clean sheet against Watford. So I expect more clean sheets between now and I think end of November is when their fixtures kind of turn back to being a little less good. So Wolves for the next couple of months, I think you have to at least target one or two of their players for sure.
DCL, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Rafa Benitez confirmed that he's out for a couple weeks. He doesn't know how long, but at least a couple weeks is confirmed. Is it time to sell if you have him, hold on to him? Or, there's a couple other options behind him with some good fixtures coming up, Marty.
Yeah, this is one where I think unfortunately you have to sell just because it's not a long-term injury, but depending on what's going on with your team, if you've already played your wild card and he's still in your team, I think you can probably make the switch to someone like a Bamford or a Jimenez just because the long-term fixtures are very good. Or if you haven't used your wild card yet and you plan on it in the next few weeks, I still think you should make that move just because, again, like I said, there's players with better fixtures long-term who I think you can target. I know, obviously, Bamford hasn't had a great season thus far, and nobody on Leeds has, and really from an attacking point of view, you can say the same about Wolves players, but the fixtures are there. It has to come good at some point for them, and with DCL being out, I think he's expected back in October, so he's going to miss the next 2, maybe 3 games, depending on how things go, and even after that, his fixtures are pretty good, but it's just not worth hanging on to him for 2 or 3 weeks when he's not going to be playing, when you can have someone in your team who might have some results coming their way. So for me, the 2 number 1 contenders in and around the same price range would be the 2 players I just mentioned, obviously Bamford and Jimenez. But another option, of course, is to, depending on what's going on with your team, you could downgrade a midfielder and upgrade to either Ronaldo or Lukaku, just because I think, especially Lukaku, like we talked about earlier, the long-term benefits of having him in your team, I think the upside's really good. So for me, I'm not a DCL owner, but if I was, I would probably go one of Jimenez or Bamford, depending on what your team looks like, and then maybe upgrade to Lukaku in a couple weeks once those fixtures turn. So that'd be my strategy. Obviously, you can look at maybe Richarlison, just because if you want to stay and if you trust Everton and you want some exposure there. But he hasn't really had anything since that first game week, so I don't know how much I trust him. But so for me, I would probably look elsewhere. Those are the players I would look at for sure.
Yeah. Personally, my number 1 option would be Raul Jimenez. 13 shots, 12 chances created. The only Premier League forward to do that. I mean, Wolves don't play another traditional Big 6 until game week 15. So he hasn't scored, but he's creating the chances. The opportunities are there, and he has players in and around him to help him or provide him that service that he'll need. So I like Raul Jimenez more than I like Patrick Bamford. I'm not going to fault you for going either way, to be completely honest with you. That's just where I'm going. Next on the list, Marty, we should probably talk about Michail Antonio. Red card, unfortunately. He's been one of the best forwards in the game thus far. Hold or sell. My take on this is, the options outside of Jimenez and Bamford, there's not much there. If you already have one of them, if you already have Jimenez or Bamford, then, where do you go? Do you drop down to Pukki? Do you look for a 4.5, or do you try and, if you're not taking a wild card, you take a couple hits to bring in another premium option? For me, at the moment, with all that said, I'm probably going to hold on to him. The fixtures are okay for West Ham moving forward.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm holding as well. And unfortunately, I'm sure there's some people out there who may own both Antonio and Calvert-Lewin, and they're in a really tough spot heading into this game week. So for me, because I was playing 3-5-2 up this whole season, and I had another transfer planned in my midfield, I'm going to hold. And I'm doing something I've never done in FPL, and I'm probably playing 5-4-1 this weekend, which will be interesting. So just because I don't want to take a hit, I don't want to use my wild card. And for me, Antonio, if you look at his fixtures on the other side of his suspension, they aren't terrible, like you said. He plays, they have Leeds away, who have not been a great team so far this season, and then Brentford at home in game week 7. And that's kind of the point where I'm considering a wild card, like we've talked about several times. So if I can hold him for the next few weeks, instead of using a transfer or taking a hit, I think it's the wise move, just because we could see returns on the other side of his suspension. And for me, I have a more pressing need elsewhere in my team. So it all depends on your situation. Maybe you don't own Calvert-Lewin, and you don't own someone like Jimenez. So you look at the long-term upside of bringing Jimenez into your team now for Antonio. That move makes sense. But if you're planning on using a wild card and you haven't already, I think depending on the situation in your team, you're okay to hold Antonio for 1 week. And honestly, from a West Ham point of view, as someone who owns Antonio and Benrahma, I would actually probably look at shipping out Benrahma before Antonio, just because I think once he's back, he's still going to be the focal point of that attack. He's been so good this season, minus his red card. Obviously, that's the only game he didn't get a return in. So I still trust him long term. And for me right now, I just don't see the point of shipping him out when I might need him for a few weeks. Mm-hmm. So I would hold personally.
Yeah, and thankfully it was 2 yellows and not a straight red, or else he'd be missing 3 straight games. Son Heung-Min for Spurs. He has a chance of actually making the lineup on Sunday against Chelsea, according to a journalist, Matt Law. He's dealing with, I think, a calf injury at the moment. But I don't think many, if you don't have him, would want to bring him in against Chelsea. Yes, they're playing at home, but it's a very difficult fixture. They haven't been very good against Chelsea in recent seasons. And then after that, you have Arsenal, Villa, and Newcastle. Not the worst. So if you don't have him and you're thinking about bringing him in, my opinion is I would stay away. At 10 million pounds, that means you're sacrificing another premium, potentially Salah, potentially Ronaldo, Lukaku, if you still want Bruno Fernandes. I just don't think he's worth it at this time. Spurs aren't scoring many goals. I mean, they just lost 3-0 to Crystal Palace. They scored 1 goal in each of their first 3 matches, so the goals aren't coming at the moment. Will they eventually? Absolutely, and I think Spurs fixtures really take a good turn starting at game week 11, so maybe look at him then. But as of right now, I don't think he's worth the 10 million price tag.
Yeah, I agree. I'm surprised at his ownership right now. It's not extremely high, but at 10.0, I understand that he has 2 goals this season, and you know that's a decent return so far. But at 10.0, 14.1% owned, I just think that's way too high for the amount of returns that he could be getting. I know he has 2 goals, and 2 goals in 3 games is pretty good, but it's one of those things where I think long term, like you said, their fixtures will turn down the road, and I just think at that price point you can probably downgrade him to I mean, there's lots of good midfield options, and then upgrade a forward. Maybe you need to use him to make room for Ronaldo or Lukaku, or I mean just to balance out your team a little bit better. So for me, I just don't see the point of owning Spurs players right now. Whether that's him or, you know, I mean, obviously Harry Kane is the big premium on that team. I just don't think it's worth targeting them until, like you said, when their fixtures turn in November. So for me, if you're one of those 14% of people who own him, or if you're someone who for some reason is considering him moving forward, I would hold for sure and drop him if you have him. Yeah,
there's other options in the midfield at a much cheaper price. Look at Rafinha, 11 shots, 7 chances created, leads the team. Then you have Jota, who's going to have a run in the team right now with Firmino out. 6.3 points per match when starting the season, Jota. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I didn't think about this until after my wild card. So I have Salah, and I brought in Jota as well after we found out about the Firmino news. Is that too much Liverpool? I mean, I have TAA, I have Salah, and I have Jota. TAA is a lock for me. Salah is also a lock. But having Jota, is that too much attacking from Liverpool?
I don't think so. And I mean, worst case scenario, you can always drop one of them. And I mean, the obvious one is Jota in that situation, just because I don't think you can drop Salah, especially being on pens. And I mean, how could you drop Trent, especially the way he's playing right now? But moving forward, Liverpool assets, although they have, I'd say, 2 or 3 tough fixtures in the next little while, they're still one of those teams who can score goals in any given day, any match against anybody. And their next few fixtures are very good, so I wouldn't look at dropping him unless somehow he finds himself out of the team. They have Crystal Palace this weekend, Brentford away, Man City at home, which, although it's a tough fixture on paper, they can still score. Watford after that, United away, Brighton, West Ham, and then between end of November and Christmas, it's not too bad either. So for me, long-term, having 2 Liverpool players makes sense. Having 3, I don't have a problem with it. But I totally understand if you want to spread it out a little bit, especially once they do have to play City and United in game week 7 and 9. Maybe you look elsewhere just in case you think there's going to be some points from someone else instead of Jota. For me, Salah's a lock and Trent is a lock, but if you only want those 2, I understand it.
Okay, let's continue with Liverpool. Captain's picks this time. Mohamed Salah against Crystal Palace. 5 goals in his last 5 games against them. He scored midweek in the Champions League. 4 goals, 2 assists in his last 5 matches, all competition. The man's on fire, and I think he's the number 1 option. We'll talk about Cristiano Ronaldo against West Ham as well, and I think Ronaldo, it doesn't really matter who Manchester United play. I think he'll always be a popular-ish captain, but this week, I think it's Salah again.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I mean, especially obviously if you don't own Ronaldo, you probably own Salah. And for me, he has to be the number 1 pick this weekend. The fixture at home against the Crystal Palace side, who, like you said, he has a good history of scoring against them. And despite the fact that they beat Spurs last weekend, I still don't think Crystal Palace are a great team, and I think Liverpool will create a ton of chances against them. And obviously he's on penalties as well, which is a big upside. So for me, he's my number one captain pick this weekend for sure. And I mean, if you want to look elsewhere on Liverpool, Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think, is a decent option if you want to go with a differential captain pick.
See, that's an interesting shout. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, he's not a differential, but him as a captain is. Mm-hmm. And if you look at him this season, he's averaging 8.5 points per game in FPL right now. He has 3 clean sheets in 4, 2 assists in 4. And the big thing for him as well is he gets bonus points a lot of the time. He has bonus points in 3 of the 4 matches they've played this season, including twice he's gotten 3 bonus points. So he's a huge, huge asset. And I think if you want to be a little cheeky and go with someone who is definitely a differential, I think he's a great shout. I still prefer Salah myself. I like playing the safer captain pick just because I think if you lose that clean sheet for Liverpool, just because you never know, maybe they concede a penalty, maybe Crystal Palace scores on the counter, who knows? But I think it's safer with Salah. But if you want to go differential, I do really like Trent this weekend if you want to do it.
The thing with captaining a defender, you really have to bank on that clean sheet. I mean, they have a pretty good chance of keeping a clean sheet at Crystal Palace, but you'd never know. Let's talk about Ronaldo against West Ham. I looked at some historical data, Marty. I dug deep into the crates. 7 matches in the Premier League against West Ham, 5 goals, 1 assist. Not a bad return. Does that mean anything? I'm not sure. We've mentioned this before, at least I've mentioned it. Some players like playing certain teams. He hasn't played West Ham since who knows how long ago that was, since he was in the Premier League. But West Ham, not the best defensive team either. They conceded in all but 1 game, 2 to Newcastle, 1 to Leicester, and 2 to Crystal Palace. So the goals are going to be there for Manchester United. Obviously, for West Ham, when you play a team like Manchester United, you're going to step up. It's going to be a much tighter and tougher game. But, I mean, I think Ronaldo, I almost said he's going to be a lock to score. But, I mean, he's pretty good. He's a pretty good shout to score this weekend against West Ham. Yeah,
I agree. I mean, there's a reason you have premiums in your team. You trust them regardless of who they're playing against. And I just think the safer play, like I said, is Salah this weekend because of the fixture. But if Ronaldo's in your team, you have to consider him. And I talked about this probably in our first week, maybe our second week. And every week, mostly, you are going to captain your premium players. So, you don't want to get too cheeky and captain a 6.0 player or a 7.5 player too often. There's a reason you pay up for these players, and Ronaldo's a perfect example of that. And I think he will be less captain than Salah this weekend just because the ownership is less. Not by that much. I think maybe like 8% difference between the two of them. But I think more people will look at that home fixture against Palace and lean Salah. So he might be a slight differential captain play this weekend, which could pan out because even if he just delivers, slightly more than Salah this weekend, maybe get some bonus points on there as well, you could end up with a better selection. But it's a bit more, I wouldn't say it's a risky pick because it's Ronaldo, but I think it's a less safe pick than Salah this weekend.
Yeah, probably number 3 on the list is going to be Romelu Lukaku against Spurs. And to be honest, not the toughest match for Chelsea. I think they're much better than Spurs. Spurs are dealing with some injury issues at the back, especially for center backs. They could be missing a couple of their first choice guys. Lukaku could take advantage of that against Tottenham. Yes, it's at Tottenham, but like I said, a much better team. He's been scoring goals. I think he's a good option as well.
Yeah, I think so. And it's one of those where, again, I think there's better options. So depending on how your team shapes up, maybe for some reason you don't own Ronaldo or Mo Salah, and you only have Lukaku as a premium, and maybe you have someone else, and
could be,
and you have to lean that way. Hard to say how people's teams have shaped up so far, but if you're in that situation, I get it. I do think it's a good option, despite it being on paper a tougher matchup, like you said. Spurs defensively dealing with some injuries right now, which I think is really beneficial for Chelsea and big Romelu Lukaku especially. So I like that definitely as a differential captain option. But at the 3 players we've already talked about, I think are all safer picks.
Yeah.
So I would put them ahead of him for sure this weekend. I just think, although I do think he has a very good chance of scoring and getting a decent return, I like to play it safe. And for me, the safest play this weekend is Salah. So I'm not, at this point in the season, especially with so much time and so many game weeks ahead to make up ground in mini leagues or even in the overall ranking, I would play it safe. So I'm leaning with the first three guys for sure. But if you don't have them for some reason and you want to look at Lukaku, he's a decent shout for sure.
Yeah, one of my rules this season was not to get too cute with the captain picks. I've done that in the past where I try to just, you want to go for that differential to try and get, a leg up on in one of your mini leagues, and it rarely works out. But I mean, if you do, Lukaku. I mean, if you want to look at some other players, maybe Jimenez, Danny Ings. If you want Bamford or Rafinha, I mean, there are players out there who can still score goals. But if you want something that is somewhat close to a lock, those three that we mentioned. Maybe we should probably touch on Manchester City. Potential captains there against a very good fixture against Southampton. They just scored 6 goals in the midweek in the Champions League. Jack Grealish on the score sheet. I think Mars is on the score sheet as well. If you have either of those players, I think it's worth a shout if you're looking for that differential.
Yeah, I mean, Man City, we talk about it all the time. I think this is one of those things where
such a strange team.
It's such a strange team, and even if I'm looking at their team right now based on ownership, and let's see, Jack Grealish is the highest owned midfielder or forward on this team. He's owned by 20% of people right now.
Decent price.
Torres, 8.0 is a good price. Torres is owned by 16.9. His price is 7.2. So it's just one of those situations where I don't know how this team's going to line up, and I just don't think that many people have City assets in their team. Like we said, I mean, Grealish being the highest owned attacker on that team at 20%. I just feel like more people, if you have him at that price, you probably have a premium in your team. And because the premiums have decent fixtures this weekend, I would lean towards a premium over that City attacker, just because Mo Salah's definitely starting. Maybe Jack Grealish gets rested for some reason, maybe not. Same with Torres. It's one of those things where City attackers, Pep Roulette, there's so much uncertainty there. It stresses me out just thinking about it, and I don't even own any of those players. So I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, it just feels like one of those where you're being a little cheeky, a little cute with your captain pick for no reason. I get it. Yeah, not this weekend. Maybe in the future, but not at this stage, I think.
Listen, this is a discussion for another time, but we're going to have to start thinking about Kevin De Bruyne. He started in the Champions League, 11.9, 1.3%. I mean, the next couple of fixtures, you probably don't want to bring him in if he is starting, but starting from game week 8 on, pretty good. Game week 13 on is even better. So it's something we're going to need to think about. He's another premium option we're going to have to consider. And it scares me, Marty, because who wants to drop Salah? Who wants to drop Ronaldo? Who wants to drop Lukaku? You don't want to do these things, but you're going to have to do it if you want these FPL returns. Let's finish off the show with our upset picks of the week. So I have mine, but I want to hear yours first.
This is an interesting weekend. I was looking at the fixtures, and I don't really see any standout upset this weekend. Like I don't see Spurs upsetting Chelsea. I mean, maybe I just don't see it. Same with West Ham at home to Man U. I just think Man U get the result there. City, I think, will beat Southampton, and Liverpool I see beating Crystal Palace. So outside the traditional top teams there, I know what your pick is. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but I don't really have an upset pick of the week this weekend. Honestly, I don't think there is a standout one for me. So we can discuss yours. We'll discuss yours.
I'm going Burnley over Arsenal. I'm not picking on Arsenal. I kind of am actually. But last 3 matches between the two, 1-1. Burnley won 1-0 away and a 0-0. And before that, Arsenal kind of ruled this head-to-head. But at the moment, I think it's the perfect time for Burnley to play Arsenal. And one thing I really think that'll be an X factor here is set pieces. Burnley, 3 goals from set pieces. Arsenal, they've conceded twice. So, I mean, it's not a big enough piece of data to really look at and consider. But I think they can really cause them trouble in the air. Chris Wood, Ashley Barnes, decent team. They look pretty good in the first half against Everton. Yes, Everton ran right through them. I think Arsenal can score. But for the upset pick of the week, you got to go off the board. You got to get different. I provided my analysis on the back end. What do you think, Marty?
I get the logic for sure. I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're right. I think this is one where I think historically, totally, I mean, especially the way Arsenal playing right now, you said you think they can score. I'm worried about whether or not Arsenal can score. I mean, they had 30 shots against Norwich and only managed to, barely score a goal in that one.
Oh, that goal. Whoa.
I do worry
But
worry.
They need those goals. Like when teams are in slumps, that's the goal that you need to break it, and it could be, listen, Aubameyang, we didn't talk about him. Moving forward, if he finds that goal-scoring touch, another player we might have to consider.
Yeah, I was reading. I think the official FPL Twitter account actually tweeted it, and he's the cheapest he's ever been in FPL right now at 9.9. Unfortunately, he's listed as a forward. I mean, I get it, but we've seen him listed as a midfielder in the past, and I just think I don't know. I don't see why anybody would bring him into their team at this stage. I know their fixtures are really good for the next little while, but until they actually start scoring goals consistently, I would stay away from this team from an attacking point of view, and even defensively. I mean, I know I still own Ben White just because I haven't played my wild card yet, and he's been stuck in my team since the beginning. But I'm holding for now just because the fixtures are decent between now and November. So I just think, I mean, I get why I could see it being an upset. I'm not totally against it. But I just don't think it's a lock, so I didn't want to lock that in, and I just can't bear to say those words out loud.
I know, I hear you. Know? But listen, the bookies have Burnley at plus 300, so listen, you throw 100 down, you get back $300. Not a bad little play. This is what I think is going to happen. It's going to be 2-1. Aubameyang's going to score a penalty. First goal, James Tarkowski. Second goal, the winner, Ben Mee. Center backs are going to rule it. Sorry, Tomasa. How do you say? I'm sorry. How do you say his name? Tomayasu? Yeah, what a great name. Great signing for Arsenal. But that's it. That's the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, make that like official. You have 3 things to do. Or one of 3 things would help. Make your like official. Hit the bell for the notification thing. And leave a comment or subscribe. That'd be 4 things. One of the 4. Just pick one. Just do one. We need someone helps the channel. So if you can do that, that'd be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, you can have Marty on Twitter at @amarty EHMARTY. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at @TheRealBirdV. And comment below with your upset pick of the week and who you're captaining. We want to know. We want to hear from you guys, the fans. You make this happen. We love you guys. Marty, I love you too. Have a good weekend.